Each week, we take a moment, sit down, and talk about things going on at the road in what we call the Road Detour.
Hey, Road family, thanks for joining us on the Road Detour. Our guest today is Josh Sitton, and Josh kind of generational. Your grandpa, Jude, and his wife was...
Ellen.
Were here years ago.
They were, yeah. Not long after I graduated high school, so probably like in my early 20s.
And you're how old now?
I'm 43. I'll be 43 in September.
So this was about the time when I first got here. Jude and Ellen, they lived right down here on the corner of the road. And,
they did.
Knew your grandpa from when he was older, but didn't have any health problems until he passed away of ALS.
He did. Yeah, Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yeah, that was tough to watch.
It was really tough. You know, they grew up in Meadowood Baptist, where I grew up, and when Granddad got bad, my dad built that house up the road there on Reno and Henny, and with the little mother-in-law suite, and moved them both in so they could take care of Granddad because he deteriorated pretty quickly.
Right.
So, which was hard to see because he was probably one of the hardest working, guys that I think I've probably ever known. So to see him go and not be able to do anything was pretty tough on Dad. So.
And your mom and dad were here?
That was my dad and his wife at the time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then you ended up here.
Yeah. So I visited a few times back then, with Dad and my grandparents, but then, left for the Army for a while and left active duty and moved back to Oklahoma in 2018. So
tell me about your military experience, because that's one of the things that I think people will find interesting. So
I was 29 and just felt like I had a really good job in the oil field, and driving home from Kentucky about Christmas in 2009, and just felt God calling me to join the Army. I just felt like there was more to life than making money and working every day. So my brother had spent 5 years in the 101st Airborne Division in a sniper section. I started talking to him about kind of what the best route was, because he had a really tough time when he got out.
101st Airborne?
101st Airborne.
That's Fort Campbell, Kentucky?
It is.
Yeah.
So he did two rotations to Iraq back when Iraq was like the worst place on the planet. And he had a really hard time. And I thought, I don't want to have the same hard time whenever I eventually get out. So I wanted to take a route in the Army that would set me up for maybe a civilian
career.
Yeah. And so he got to do some missions with Special Forces over there in Iraq, Green Berets, and suggested that be the route I take. So that's what I did. I enlisted in February of 2010 as a Special Forces candidate, they call it. So they'll take you right off the street. And I went through infantry. They call it one station unit training. So it's basic training, and followed right into infantry school down at Fort Benning, Georgia. 16 weeks total for that. And then I left my infantry school barracks and went straight to airborne school. It was just a few miles down the road there at Fort Benning, and trained in jumping out of airplanes. And so we did that for, I think that course is 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I can't remember now, but finished up right before Christmas in 2010, took a bus to Fort Bragg, and went to, they call it Special Forces Preparation and Conditioning course, and it's a 3 week.
That was fun. That sounds like a blast.
I don't know if fun would be the word I would use to describe it, but a very humbling time in my life. I was 30 years old. I turned 30 in basic training. I was older than all of my drill sergeants except for one. So I was at an advantage to really see what was happening around me and really be able to, I think, surrender to the things that God was, doing in my life at the time with, just the humbling of, the mind and the ego. And, I spent 10 years riding bulls and rodeoing and ranching. And, I was kind of the guy that had been beat up quite a bit, by those things, and just kind of had a, nothing can stop me mentality. And so going into the Special Forces, so I went through that, which prepared me for the assessment and selection course. Got selected to be to go into Green Beret training. And I spent 2 years there. I learned Spanish, spent 6 months in Spanish, went through small unit tactics where we learned it's basically like Green Beret's version of Ranger School. Got a lot of cultural training and unconventional warfare training and all that stuff. So it was a very unique opportunity that really shaped not only myself as a man, as a young man, but also as a Christian, really started to see some correlations between just the challenges that are presented to us,
How to overcome.
Yeah, how to overcome, mentally, emotionally, physically, but also spiritually, because you get to a point where if you're a believer, there's really no other way to get through it, a lot of times. So
I want to go back and land on something that just keeps seeming to resurrect a theme in my life and in working with young ministers and developing people, and that's submission. Mm-hmm. You called it humility. Mm-hmm. So go back and tell me how submission. What were you submitting to? What did you learn to submit to through that process?
That's a really good question. I think submitting to one thing that really stands out was. Again, just my personality and what I think God was trying to show me that needed to change as a person. Because when you go through that training, it's, you have to be physically and mentally capable to go through the things. It's a very psychologically driven training methodology, right? Yeah, they break you down and rebuild you in the way they want you type of situation. But a big part of that is peers. So after each phase, you peer reviewed each other.
Right.
And it was your opportunity to say, hey, man, you suck at X, Y, and Z, but you're really good at A, B, and C. And so it was the guys that became successful were the guys that took that.
Yeah, okay, so this is it. This is exactly what I'm talking about, is all of us need people in our life looking at us and going, right, here's where you need to work. And there are two kinds of people. There are people who can hear it.
For sure.
And act on it. And there's people who ignore it.
Right.
Say it isn't true or excuse it away.
Right.
And the difference in where those two people go is unreal.
It is. Yeah, it's night and day.
The guys who can go, man, thank you for caring enough about me. Look at me and go, brother, check this.
Right.
And dealing with that in life versus those who go, well, it's just your opinion or you just don't like me.
Right.
In my life, I'm old. I'm past the point of whether liking you or not matters, right?
Right, for sure.
That I understand this is about an end game, and the challenge of and you go through this of working with people you don't like,
100%,
because of what they bring to the table, man, and submitting
100%.
To that whole process. So that's exactly what that's exactly where God has been teaching me some things here lately.
For sure, and I think kind of you touched on it. A lot of the guys, I grew up in a ranching community, right? And so pretty much everybody had the same mindset, right? We kind of had the same political views and the same, religious views and experiences. And then I went into the Army, and it's like, whoa. There's people of all different types of personalities and backgrounds, and a lot of those guys I did not like, could not stand. But I'm probably closer with them now than some of the people that I was close with
that you
earlier
had similarities
in life.
with. Right.
And so, but I think what I see kind of making that cross-reference spiritually is that, God calls us to love everybody, right? And to be peacemakers. And that's been something that God has been showing me, in my life recently is, I went from a mentality that made me successful in the special operations community in the Army to now that mentality doesn't really work in church and in everyday life as I'm trying to build relationships and maintain relationships and coming across people that don't like me or that I don't really care for them. and at this point, I don't have to get along with them, right? Because I'm not working in a team environment.
Your life
with them.
doesn't depend on it.
Right. But spiritually, God calls me to love them and pour into them and speak truth into them. And so I think that mentality that I learned from that training and my experience in the Army 100% correlates now into the relationships that God is trying to use me in, and so
That's good. That's really insightful.
yeah, it's
Couple of questions that we didn't prep. We didn't prep for any of this. By the way,
I had no idea what I was coming here for.
One of the cool things about the Road Detour is it's conversation, and it's real conversation. And so, toughest thing you encountered in your military life?
I would say at the time I was married, long distance marriage, because my wife at the time had a son from a previous relationship, and we lost the custody battle. He could not move to North Carolina with us, and so my wife at the time decided that she couldn't leave her child, and I supported her in that. And so for the entire 8 years I was active duty, living at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. She lived in Oklahoma.
That's tough.
And that was definitely a struggle and something that I still pray about, still work through a lot, because it created a lot of time and distance for me to make a lot of bad decisions. And, kind of going through the...
Okay, let me pause you again. Mm-hmm. And I've known you for a while, right? And I've watched you grow a lot spiritually. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying right now to me is some of the evidence of that growth is that I've analyzed my life. I've looked at my life. Not everything about my life is perfect.
Right.
I'm going to be honest about those things in my life and share some of those experiences so somebody watching the detour learn some stuff from it. So I appreciate that about you, man.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to see, and I think we had a little short video clip at one of the men's events where I spoke, where I learned in SEER school, the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape school that all special operations personnel have to go through. And it became very apparent to me how Satan wins. Isolation. And not only isolation, but he makes you think that you're the only person going through that particular situation. And in doing that, what it did is it separated me from people that I should have been close to.
Could have walked with you.
Could have walked with me, could have encouraged me. Well, when you step away from those people and you begin to isolate yourself, you quit going to church. You quit praying, right? Quit reading your Bible. I call it the slow fade. And I think I heard that somewhere, sometime, maybe a pastor in a sermon, but the slow fade, it's kind of like the frog in the hot water, right?
Frog
you turn it on, real quick, he's going to jump out. But if you just turn it up and incrementally, he's going to cook. And that's exactly what I saw Satan doing in my life was, I started feeling sorry for myself, and all my buddies that seemed like had families, and I hated hanging out with them because they were with their family and I wasn't. I joined the Army because I felt like God was calling me to do it. I married my wife because I felt like that's who I was supposed to marry, and then now I can't have both, and so I got really angry at God. And I became consumed. I felt God calling me to the Army to become a Green Beret, which I never did accomplish. I ended up voluntarily leaving the qualification course because we had Charlie. And I knew if I went to a team, because I spoke Spanish, I'd be going to 7th Group down in Florida, which was 5 states away from Oklahoma. I'd be in the constant training and deployment rotation. I'd never seen my daughter. And so I left to try and get closer to home. That didn't work out. I ended up staying at Bragg anyway. Stayed in special operations community. Got a lot of great opportunities. But in retrospect, it really started the downhill, the undoing of my spiritual life. And I truly did walked for a while on the dark side, as I like to call it. And it took a lot to bring me back. from
So
that.
what did start you back?
Jessica and I actually talk about this quite a bit. One of the women that I met while I was in North Carolina was a Christian, and she kind of saw what was going on. I don't know how. I truly think God gave her some discernment, and she uncovered the whole situation and brought it all to light. And it definitely we're still friends to this day. We dated for 5 years, and it may be exaggeratory, but I tell her, I owe you my life. I really do, because I don't know how far I would have continued, down that path. So just a lot of restoration, a lot of accountability, a lot of hard conversations, and
Were you in church anywhere before you got here?
so I went to Manna Church out there in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It's a huge church, really great place. They do a lot for the community, do a lot around the world. A lot of the service members attend there. Really enjoyed that church, but I never got plugged into a small group. I was saved when I was 10. I grew up in the church and went to all the Falls Creeks and Super Summers and Disciple Nows. And during that period in my life, I think it was more of just, it was what I did.
Social thing.
I'm supposed to go to church every Sunday. So
Right.
I went, but that's kind of where it stopped. I mean, there were, I can't say I was completely separated from God. I mean, God still intervened a lot. And I found myself, crying at night and, breaking down and, crying out to him. But it never produced any long-term resolution. It was like, I'd cry, I'd have a fit, I knew I was sinning and in a bad place and doing, where I wasn't supposed to be. And then I'd wake up the next morning and
Do it all over again.
do it all over again.
Yeah.
And not making excuses by any means, but I really think it was compounded by the mindset that the Army was developing in me at the time, which was, special operations. You're trained to operate as a team, but you also have the capability to operate independently, right, when necessary. And so it was just, I found myself drawing on my own
Doing it by yourself.
knowledge, skill, and ability, and you can't do that. You can't do that. That'll leads to destruction every time.
I want to kind of draw this thing down. Tell me maybe the biggest thing God has done since you've been at the road.
Oh man,
You met your wife here.
yeah. I met my wife here. I went on the first mission trip to Mexico, which was played a huge role in kind of the transition. That was the year after I moved back home, and really kind of recentered my focus, and I was able to see. It was really I think, I can't say the first time, but it really opened my eyes to what God was doing and could do, and it really reminded me of where I came from. And I thought, man, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. This is where I need to be.
You're involved in our men's ministry.
Yes, got involved in the men's ministry, not even planning to. Pastor Matthew came to church. I can't remember what year, and I don't even remember how him and I started talking. I used to stand at the back before I was married. I would stand at the back during the service, just because I didn't like sitting down. But and Pastor Matthew would walk back there, and he just struck up conversation, and we started talking about military things. And I don't know, a few months went by, and he had asked me to be on his men's council, and that's where it really took off.
I promise you, it did.
It did. Yeah. And
You in the Bible reading plan?
Bible reading plan. Yep. And
If you don't know what the Bible reading plan is, we read as a church God's word every day. Read the same passage, write notes, and then we're in accountability groups. I got 3 going in my life. Are you in more than one or just one?
more than one. So we got the our men's Bible study table leader group that I'm in. Matt and I are in another one with a couple of guys, and then I think I'm in the Tuesday night.
Joe's group?
Yeah, Joe
Yeah.
Simeon's group. Yeah.
How and I'm going to put a bow on it with this. How big is the BRP been, the Bible reading plan?
It's been huge. We talked about this actually the other morning at our meeting, and it's so multifaceted, and what's funny is going around the room talking to all those guys, everybody says it's changed my life. And normally when people say that, you're like, okay, that's a generic answer, right? But it's true, because there's so many different ways, that's impacted that. Really, the easiest way is to say it's changed my life. But what I like most about it, Jessica and I were talking about this the other day, is the story of David and Goliath. It's a story you've heard since you were
a kid,
old enough to talk, and but I don't think I've read that story, ever actually read that story, right? It's always been told to me, and so just to see how in my journaling, I said, I love how David just strolls into this camp and it just like scoffs at Goliath. There was no prayer or preparation or, hyping up to go kill this giant. It was just like this.
Another day at the park.
Yeah, that's what God put me here to do, And so things like that, the story going through the Bible, you just see things in more detail. You see things from a different perspective, because even parts of the Bible I've read earlier in life, I'm now 42, almost 43, and I have a deeper understanding, and things speak to you differently. And
that's good.
I think the coolest thing for me, though, is being in those threads, is seeing, we call it the living word, right? It is the living word, and that to me never really, I can't say it didn't mean anything to me, but not until going through the BRP did it really mean something.
I understand.
To me, which is God speaks. You could have 20 dudes in a text thread, and 20 dudes are going to have
a different message.
Different. Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, it's so cool.
If you're not in the BRP, you go to our website, TheRoad.tv, and it's a splash that comes up as soon as you get there. It's one of the most important things we do. Josh, thank you for your time, brother.
I appreciate you having me on.
Man.
I love it. I love you. I appreciate it.
It's great watching what God's doing in your life and where you're going from here.
It's been awesome.
Thank you guys for joining us on The Road Detour.